India has been put on the technology map, the global map, by the amazing technical talent we have and the amazing services company we have produced so far. But now we are taking a lead on the technology products as well. And today we'll get to hear from some of these amazing disruptive technology startups India has produced, and you'll get to hear and learn from their journey. Just to get started, can I get a sense of the audience? So how many of you out here are developers? Could you raise a hand? Oh, that's so wonderful. And how many of you are actually building or thinking of building a product, sort of in prototyping? Nice. And any of you are in a scaling up phase? Okay, so we have a few. So guys, Mohan did a personal and professional introduction. If you guys could start introducing your technology and your technology stack and helping us understand how exactly you got here. So we could start from...
So Compile is basically a data company. We collect a lot of public and private data and process it. The technology stack is mostly Python, backed by Postgres, Elasticsearch, Redis. Yeah, that's essentially it. And a lot of crawlers are with Java and Python. It's a hybrid.
And if you could shed some light on how did you decide on this particular stack?
So early on when we started Compile, it was 2 engineers. It was initially PHP. Soon we realized that we weren't able to do much with it based on our use cases. I'm not saying PHP is bad. It's great for some stuff. And we shifted to Python, which we were aware of from our past companies. Soon we realized we had to shift a whole bunch of things, and our crawlers became Java-based, whereas our entire web stack was Python. Soon, over the last 3 years, I think we moved all our web stack to Node. So it essentially becomes a hybrid over time. You might start with something, but over time your product just changes, and you realize that the scale is different, and you change your tech stack over time.
I hear this all the time. So startups building and prototyping their product on PHP, and then quickly using a much more suitable technology for their product. So what about Shikil?
So like we're in the business of securing the web, and 80% of the web still functions in PHP, which comes down to 1 million, or I'll say billion websites. So a lot of our tech stack still is PHP LAMP stack, while since a lot of security tools come in Python flavor, so we have a lot of stuff built in Python. And for infrastructure, it's the DigitalOcean and AWS that make sure that everything is available.
And was this stack something you decided on the day one, or like has it evolved?
Of course, it has evolved as we evolved our solution. But then the thing is that security is an industry where that happens best when it's tailored to the tech stack that the core website or infrastructure that you are protecting is made in. So since 80% of the web was PHP, we thought that we need to have that PHP component sitting on a customer's website, where on our server we have the flexibility of making a more hybrid app using the best of the technologies or flavors that are coming in, be it Node, Python's different script, or more such things.
Hi everyone. So at Haldos, we provide on-premise DDoS mitigation and application firewall solution. So this typically sits in the data center and at the very edge of the data center. So all the traffic goes through it, both incoming as well as outgoing traffic of a data center. So for us, what is the most important thing was the performance. And that's why naturally the technology that we were working on was C and some kernel level programming. So that's how we started off. For the real-time dashboard and analytics and all, we used Java, and we were actually all over the place. We are currently using some components of Lua in our programming. We are using C, C++. We are using Java. Of course, web technologies like React, and some level of, for entire building a test framework, Python, Perl. Some components are in Perl as well. and recently added Ruby to the stack for an audit framework that we are building. So yeah, so we are all over the place. It actually depends upon the what problem you're trying to solve, and what is the best suitable technology for that.
How has your technology framework evolved? So when you just started, what all were you using, and how did you start adding these technologies?
So we started first with the DDoS component as a network security appliance, and our focus was straight, we need to get it done, and the best technology for us at that point of time is C, and still today it is C, because the lower level programming gives you the most performance. We crunch 10 gigs of traffic per second, and to analyze that and to do so, we need a low level programming language. That's why we stuck to C. So that has not changed.
Got it.
At Rapido, we basically have a huge stack, more than 150 microservices on production. So which has, we predominantly we work on Node.js and Java, but we do have Go, Python, Scala, all other languages in place. So that's up to the developer for whenever we have one particular problem which needs a bit of tuning, which is very language specific. We just go ahead, quickly learn that particular language and start implementing it. That's how we see that. Apart from the technologies, the languages, we do work with lot many technical stack, I would say. We have Kafka, Elasticsearch, Redis, Cassandra, Mongo. So there are a number of tools that the open source technologies we predominantly use, that we make use of to make sure everyone reaches faster their home there. So that I can give you as a brief of what we do at Rapido.
So one thing I always see, these days every product which gets built uses some sort of microservices architecture, which allows you to very easily play with multiple technologies and sort of have the right technology for that right component.
By the way, we didn't start with microservice from day one. So it's been 3 years that we started. So possibly for 6-8 months, we had one big monolith having all our services written in PHP. Very soon we realized that this wouldn't suffice all of our needs. We ran into issues like one customer having 2 drivers assigned to him, or somewhere where we need the synchronous and asynchronous nature together is where we thought Java and Node.js were the right tools for us to go towards. So hence, we took a bit early on bet to move towards microservices with a team of 6 to 8 people at that point of time, which usually people doesn't recommend doing that, moving towards microservices at very small scale. But we took that decision to make sure that the customer reaches on time, and we made sure we were available for the company whenever required.
Cool. So I have a follow-up question regarding this. So all the technology decisions which you guys have taken, how influenced were they by the right architecture or by the availability of talent? So it was like, okay, I need to use C for this job. So did you go out and find talent for those particular technologies, or were your existing team sort of learning, or were those decisions primarily, okay, I have these kind of people in my core team, let's just use and get a product out?
So in my case, so there's a story behind it. I started with a PHP website, basically a build sharing website before, and I got some interns, and that time I was in US and I was getting the job done by these interns. When I started my company, I got those guys as full-time employees. So my focus area is in software development, that took over at the level of kernel level.
Just hold the mic closer.
Okay. So we work close to the kernel. We require programmers who understand security. Getting that combination is not something that you will find in the industry just like that. So we had to train people from ground up, explain the security as well as the technology. Per se, I don't feel that technology is something that technology should not be the driving force of you implementing a problem, a solution to a problem. Depending upon the problem, the right technology you go ahead with. Basically, somebody knowing Java, the same problem can be solved probably in PHP. It's just that you need to look at both, whether you have the competence to do that, what is the learning curve in solving that problem, and are you doing justice to the in solving the problem with the technology that you're using. So based on these parameters, we then take a call that this is what we'll go ahead with. That's why we are all over the place with various technologies, because we need to solve the problem and probably as fast as we can.
So that is one advice for all the developers out there as well. So today the companies who are hiring, they are looking not just for people who with a particular skill, but who can rapidly adapt and learn new technologies for the right kind of problem.
I think it's more about the will. So one quality that we look after when we're looking for developers is that how moldable and how, in Hindi they say that how much keeda they have, how much bug they have to actually learn more things. Because developers take a company forward with them if they have that bug. Because as a CXO, you would have a limited insight in the tech industry, what's going on. But a developer, he would be much deep into the latest tech coming on a GitHub. They're always on top of what's going on Hacker News or Reddit. To answer your question, I remember a friend of mine, I'm sure a lot of engineers in the audience would relate to it. A friend of mine wanted to start a blog back in college, and he ended up writing a CMS for that. So that's how tech guys are. If they want to write stuff, they'll end up building a CMS complete for that. So that is one thing that being a CXO, you have to refrain them also, have a quality, have a check in place where you're talking to 10 different guys like you who've been through that journey and tell you that, you know what, sometimes these guys would go way deep into as you require. But coming on to the main answer, that people can be trained until you are able to get people with the right attitude and that mindset in place. So the tech decisions should be agnostic of the resources available to you.
So yeah, I agree with that. Your tech decisions should be agnostic. Reality is when you hire, at least at Compile, what we look for is good programmers, good problem solvers. We have had engineers who have come on board who have never used the languages that we use, but they have been with us for over 5-6 years, and they're in the core team as of now. So what you look for is problem solvers. They come in, they solve the problem. For them, learning a language is also a problem that they're solving. So they will just solve it and get on with it. Another thing that we look for is when we hire specifically is how fast can they prototype. Reality is you're not going to be working on the hardest problems every single day in your job. You're most of the time prototyping small problems and seeing how fast can you get a solution. So another thing is finding engineers who can prototype fast. You are not looking for production level code, you're looking for something that solves a problem. And then you probably take it to production, see if it works. If it doesn't work, you just take it out, throw it out, find a new solution. This also impacts the cost of the, it's the more the time the engineer spends on building something is actually additional cost for the company. So you want engineers who build quick and dirty things.
So that is something I see all the time. So companies who are just starting out, they have to find developers who can really prototype and are not perfectionists, because I have met developers who are perfectionists and they will just not ship. They will just keep on building the product, just finalizing. And the fact is, when you're looking to scale, in those initial days, the customer feedback is something which is most critical. So you have to get your product out. So as a follow-up question to what you were telling about a friend building a CMS, I know Rapido is a funded company and rest all of you are bootstrapped. Tell me about the build versus buy decisions you face in the company. And don't just tell about the philosophy part. Tell me the exact examples where you had to put that philosophy into production, so had to make a decision whether to build or buy. And I would love if you, some of you could share the regrets which you had. So some of the bad decisions which you took in build versus buy.
Absolutely. So, not being mentioned as a funded person sitting in the panel here, but nonetheless, the Rapido being an operationally driven company, we have lot many resources and lot much focus on towards the operations than technology there. To be very frank, the strategy becomes more important, tech being the enabler for Rapido there. So that being said, to answer you there, we had been till now, even with having 150 plus microservices on production, we were able to keep the cost as minimal as possible. It's not more than $1,500 that we pay actually. So which is basically which would give us a lot of confidence to say that hey, we have, whatever we are doing is actually working there. So hence, to be very frank, we all of our solutions what we have built are in-house and not something that we have bought, and hence we use very less of managed services to have the control over the cloud provider, but nonetheless, sometimes it comes really handy, I would say. When I say buying out a product, I would say in this digital world, and now the developers are so advanced that managed service is also in kind of, a bot service, I would say. With that, we do use few of the tools of DigitalOcean here as well for our, using the managed services of DigitalOcean, which helps us at times when we need the performance at the crucial times, at the peak times that we have.
So build versus buy. So I'm first of all, big fan of open source technology. I am a technical guy, so that's where my heart lies. But for example, the end, as the CEO, the end thing comes is basically where does the economics lie and what do they say? So for example, I'm not a front-end guy. I can't make beautiful websites and all. So I typically outsource my website to somebody else. I don't mind paying for that. But yes, the core technology, we do it in-house, and that's where our IP lies. So that's a call that you have to take if you are using some specialized database or something. If you prototype, you see that you don't get the level of performance or the reliability of the solution, that's a cost that you have to take, because at the end of the day, when your product gets shipped, you also have to provide the support. You also have to provide the assurance that the solution is going to work with the minimum downtime. So when all of those things are considered, the economics finally come into play, and then you have to make a call whether you need to go with a supported product or you need to go with something which is open source, and you just take in the technology, adapt it, and start using it. So it's a question based on, where is the economics.
Anything which you thought of sort of internally building and then you eventually decided to use an open source product or just outsource it?
No, most of my decisions in technology is driven through consensus, where we have a design meeting and we take a call what we need to do. So before we start investing in a technology, we do 1-2 weeks of quick prototype to see whether it can actually match the level of expectations that we have from the problem, from the solution that we expect for the problem. If yes, we go ahead with the open source one. If no, then we take a trial of the product, a paid product, and see if it works. In most cases, open source has worked.
You still haven't given me a decision. You still haven't given me a decision where you took.
See, I have not taken for any of my core product. I have not taken any paid product. I'm using everything open source, and it works. Facebook works on open source technologies. So many companies do. So these are good products we should definitely leverage upon. Yes, for my cloud-based services, we use DigitalOcean, AWS, etc. But that is a platform. But from the technology point of view of my software, my IP, it's completely based on open source technology.
And what about you guys?
This is quite in sync with what Anshul said. Being in security industry, you have to, I guess it's a security industry thing, that a lot of things you have to build in-house, because that's where, because if you're putting that open source or using something else, then bad guys out there also know that what you're using, which makes it difficult. So the core of the solution always is built in-house, a lot of dependency on open source. But at the same time, over these years, we've found ourselves to, as a founder, I have seen this shift in the company, how things work is that initial thing used to be that build everything in-house, which is not necessarily a good thing. Over the years, we've become this seen a shift from being this build everything in-house to a card swiping company. When I say a card swiping company, we've been using a lot of SaaS solutions because, again, tech guys have this psyche that if they want a CRM, they end up building stuff like a CRM for the tech solution. Invoicing solution, they won't go to a Zoho or some other invoicing solution. They'd start building or some small functionality within their tool. So that is one thing we learned, that over these years, be very stern in what needs to be developed in-house. That usually is the core of the product. UI is one thing which is a bit different from what Anshul said. We get a lot of our business is done inbound. So their UI UX plays a huge role. The psychology of how a customer is coming on a website plays a huge role. So we don't prefer outsourcing that. That is done in-house. But apart from that, anything that is on the back end and not a core of our app is a card swiping thing, which is a SaaS solution that we are using. And that's worked out really well, because if there's an invoicing solution, their day in and day out job is to make invoicing better. They would do that much better than us. So there's no point having that headache and spending our precious developer hours on that.
Yeah, don't reinvent the wheel, essentially.
Correct.
Anything?
I'll just give an experience that we had. We wanted a crawler specifically for a couple of web pages, and we wanted to extract some information out of it. So our philosophy at Compile is do not reinvent the wheel. So our first idea was to look out for solutions. We ended up finding something that was widely used, and we were happy with it for almost 3-4 months. And we got a sudden notice that they're shutting down because of an acquisition. Like, okay, fine. And they also gave us a way to port to another service. We ported it. Soon after porting, we realized that that is becoming costlier for us. So we ended up spending a week looking at features that we use from them. And we actually bought it in-house. So the philosophy that I'm trying to say here is you don't need to always have a philosophy that you will always build in-house or go out and buy things. You can always have a hybrid philosophy and see if you buy something and it matches with the cost of not losing a business, you take that and then think of building it in-house. You can prolong most of the time building things in-house by taking something that is outside.
So I totally agree on these points, and just to add to that, a lot of companies are now starting to build products which are just APIs. So like you were talking about invoicing solution. So there's a company called Twilio. Their entire product is just built on APIs for developers. So whatever problem as a developer you're trying to solve, just see who has sort of solved that problem. And today in the API first world, they would have some sort of APIs which you as a developer can integrate in your core product. And anything which your competitor can just go and buy, don't try to build it in-house, because that is something which is not going to differentiate. With that, I would like to understand any regrets which you have in the technology stack. So which a decision which you took to build, or just a technology which you wanted to use and then you later had to get burned. So you shared something.
Yeah, so initially when we started out, it was PHP, and I don't know why, we didn't even have a framework in place. We wanted to get things done fast, and soon we understood that we are going to get burned. And with our experience from the past on an e-commerce site, we decided, okay, and both of us worked together on that e-commerce site also. So we decided, okay, let's switch to Django and see if we can rewrite the entire thing under a week. thankfully, we were able to do that. And yeah, it was a small regret, but that shift helped us in the long run.
Any other technology decisions gone bad?
Lots.
Something you can share?
There was this one scenario where we were trying to move from traditional RDBMS to NoSQL database, and our choice of choosing the NoSQL database was a bit tricky. So we needed something real time, and so we tried a couple of solutions. So yeah, the one thing that comes with open source is you have to check the reliability. It may look good, it may appear to solve the problem. When you start using it, you start finding that it's too buggy and it doesn't work in production, and then you get the call from the customer, and then you're like, oh no, made a mistake. So yeah, so things like that can happen. So you need to do a good thorough testing. That's why I said we started with the process of first evaluating the product very well before just jumping the gun, because it may happen that when you go into production, when you need to scale, it will just fall apart. So that happens. So our issue happened with the database that we had chosen. Fortunately, we had an older build which was working with a different database, and we were able to rectify the problem immediately. But then the thing is, in production, it should just simply work. It should not break.
So yeah, I would say initially when we started out with, couple of servers, and as the business scaled, we had to make it horizontally scaled to cater to the need of the day actually. So then as we scaled, we put in Nginx on top of it, and it was working fine for a couple of days, and suddenly we hit into issues which was still on open in the Nginx world as well. So it was open issues on latest version of Nginx there. So we had nowhere to go. So there we started, okay, this is not the way that it should happen. It should happen. So what we did was we started looking into the code of Nginx. That's what open source gives us. So and then try to fix the bugs in the Nginx code, and hence we are able to get that up and running. So very soon we had to think of a better architecture for the next quarter, I would say, and hence we had moved an complete to something called Kong, which is built in Lua there. So which again nobody had experience on Lua there. So we had to learn Lua, so that we learned Lua, implement it, and then put it into production. All things happening in couple of weeks to make things right at the production is what we do. So I think it's more on the people than the architecture or whatever it is. So once you find the right, once you find the problem, if you are stubborn enough to solve that, I think yes.
So I think with one last question, I would like to close this. For what next level of scale do you generally plan and build your technology and infrastructure? So wherever you are, is it how many X or how many more users do you plan while building the technology and infrastructure?
Certainly, it's not for every aspect of it. I would say we have we have a number of services, but which are the core which we think we need. We foresee in the we'll think in the scale of 30x. I would say that's the for the core services, and the rest all it would be mostly whenever required. With the crunch of resources that we have, I think it's not possible to have everything on scale. Doesn't make sense there. Yeah.
And what about you guys? For what scale or what time period do you build?
So what we've done, so we just moved to a cloud-based platform, and how we did it was that we anticipated these many number of users would probably start using it in this much time frame of mind. So there's a level of stress testing that we do. in-house just by prototyping. So we use Dio for a development platform anyway, so that's why we stress it. See whether we can scale up to that. If we can, great. If we can't, then we see whether our design decision is fine. If they require some tweaking, we do so and they do it. So we plan it like that. And see, as you scale more and more, I think your design will also startly getting tweaked more and more. You have few microservices, they will further become microservices, and that's how you will end up scaling up. So don't overkill your technology stack. Just do what is required for that many number of users that you anticipate. If it goes big and if you're coming close to the level of your anticipated number of users, then you start planning and implementing for the next 10x or whatever scale that you want to do. There's no number on it.
So quickly, you guys, if you can tell.
Sure. So, like they've mentioned, there's no perfect answer. I just like to mention two words. First word being decoupled, because if you've got everything decoupled, then that it's automatically scalable. Second, modular. So everything is built in a modular fashion that helps you plan way better for scale, be it 30x for 50x or 100x users in future. At the same time, there's no point being overkill or being in that engineer's dilemma where you're actually aiming for the perfect solution, because that doesn't happen. So whenever we are planning scale, there is a date in mind that by this date we are projecting such users, ideally 10x that, and set up a more ambitious deadline for the tech team, because you know that they're going to miss by a month for sure. So,
Your take.
From Compile's perspective, it's not generally users, it's the amount of data that we need to process. So what we end up doing is, if you have, say, 1 GB of data to process in a specific module, you try with 3 to 4 gigs of fake data, and you test that, because you tend to see that you expect 1 GB and the real world would be 2 GB of data, or sometimes it's even 100 MB. You just don't know what amount of data you're going to get. So you expect like a little bit more. And when it comes to data, it's not just scale, the amount of collisions and amount of bad data that you're going to get, how is that going to affect your data storage? That becomes a big problem. Do you want to really store this amount of bad data, or do you discard it? Those kind of issues become a problem when it comes to scale, the amount of bad data.
Awesome. So do we have time for questions? Okay. So I think this conversation was really helpful. And as a closing remark, I would suggest anybody who's thinking out of building a product, just sort of have an architecture in mind and go talk to other successful founders. I think their insights would really help you. And yeah, just get the products out there. Thank you.